Well, hey there folks, Chuck here, and yeah, we're back with the second part of this. Sorry it took so long, but normally I don't move twice in the middle of a build. But here we are. So, decals. I made these old school style using the basic inkjet decal printing kits that you can get from testers or from Amazon. And so that means no white pigment, just straight up printing on your home inkjet printer. So that was important to keep in mind. I used a mix of decal paper that had white backing and decal paper that had clear backing to get the effect I needed. And when I made the graphics in Photoshop, I kept that in mind. And you may notice that the name of the company is Ben & Andrews Salvage. And that is a nod to the other builders in this build-off. Thanks again for understanding, Ben & Andrew. I kept in touch with them through the process. They've been wonderful and supportive. And I'm going to spare you all of the putting decals together. And there they are. Turned out pretty good, if I do say so myself. And then it was time to finish up the weathering. I did a lot of splattering effects on the inside where grease and sludge would get thrown around. Just using a wet paintbrush and some very thin paint, but then almost dry again, so it was nice and viscous, but there wasn't too much of it. I used the Tamiya weathering powders, which are a great set if you're getting started in weathering. And honestly, I still think there are some things that pigments can do that paint can't. So they're a good thing to have in your arsenal. Also, it's a good idea to wait until your decals are applied before doing pigments, because that will help them blend better, as they will be something that was applied to the vehicle when it was clean, and then the pigments simulate all the grime and stuff that happens after the decals are applied. I also used some MIG subtle dirt wash all over the inside areas where dirt and dust would accumulate, and then dab most of it off. And then some AK Interactive dark rust deposits on the corners. And then Tracy noticed I had a nice clean piece of work paper, so she asked if she could decorate it. You may notice she is working on a vehicle herself. That will be the subject of a future video. Can a 4-year-old customize a diecast? We'll find out. Alright, now back to the inside. This turned out to be a tougher undergoing than I thought, because, yeah, I wanted it to have lots of variations in color, and that meant using a tiny bit of a lot of paint. I used a lot of AK Interactive and Vallejo, especially the AK Interactive bold colors for things like the orange traffic cone to help them stand out. Once all the colors were applied, I did a bunch of different rust deposits. AK Interactive has quite a few to choose from. I used light, dark, and medium. And as soon as I was done with them inside the dumpster, I'd go around to the other parts of the vehicle and add those details where I felt they were needed. Then it really came down to a bunch of washes on things. I used oiled earth washes, I used grease and bearing shaft washes and filters. My daughter came and painted on her car a little bit, and then it was back to some more washes. I didn't know what this dome on the front did, but I wanted it to have a nice patinaed look, so I painted it kind of a coppery color at first, and then ended up going over it with a turquoise later. I wanted the areas like where the Cybertruck connected to the trailer, and areas like the engine on the bottom of the car, and anywhere where grease would accumulate to have a nice shiny greasy look. So I made sure to use AK Interactive engine oil and fuel stains and some other shinier paints for those. One of the washes that I really like that I'm starting to get used to using is this MIG gray for white wash. So for a white vehicle like this one, you apply it over and it creates this very nice, very subtle gray texture effect over the top of the white to kind of imitate how white looks when it gets slightly dirty. And while there was a lot of filth on this build, I wanted the outside of the vehicle to look kind of slightly dirty, like maybe it was run through a pressure washer every month or so. Underside areas got a little bit of detailing with some warm gray to have them stand out and look like corroded metal. I wanted to make sure that the outside arm that I added was nice and grody, so it got lots of extra attention to make sure that it had rust washes all over it, including the MIG Extreme Rust Wash, which really does a lot with very little. If you like your rust to be extreme, it's definitely the way to go. I wanted to make sure all the hydraulics were nice and shiny too, so I used some Stewart Simple mirror paint to make sure that those all looked like they were in proper regular working order, because that's what they look like. That's what heavily used and heavily greased pistons and pneumatics and hydraulics look like, because they're always in motion, so they tend to stay clean. I used fluorescent paints on all of the different LED cables that I added, just so if this does happen to sneak its way under a blacklight someday, those will stand out. It's just something kind of fun. Give it a little cyberpunk flair, which feels good for a Cybertruck. I didn't really know what to do with the outside pivot points for some of the mechanics here, since they're not really based on anything, so I just gave them kind of a tinny tin Vallejo color accent. Made sure to add a few greasy spots on the bottom of the dumpster container, make it look like oil or other stuff had leaked down into them. Every now and then I would pause on this and give it a shot of AK Interactive Ultra Matte. I consider it saving my progress. It's just a nice way to make sure that if something goes wrong, it's like a sort of a save button almost to kind of lock in that layer of pigment. So if you do have to take something off, you're taking it down to the last layer of clear and not taking too much of the paint below it off. That can still happen though, so it's not foolproof, but it is almost chuck proof, and that's what I need. The last wash that I threw on everything was Nuln Oil, and that's just because it's a nice, simple black wash, and it's really handy for getting into cracks and crevices and helping them stand out. And the regular Nuln Oil, when you buy it, make sure that you don't buy the gloss one, because the gloss one will put a sheen on everything. And this one is basically just a really nice, simple water-based wash. I found in one of my cases some old weathering powders, and this was one of my favorite ones when I was doing 1/25th scale, and so for nostalgia's sake, I decided to put some of it in the bin and on the bottom of the dumpster container. And I really like how it turned out. I'm going to miss that when it's gone. I initially was going to use some Greenlight wheels. Unfortunately, those turned out to be too big, so I used these Tread 64 wheels that are designed for the VW bus. The Treads wheels were painted with Vallejo tire black and AK Interactive rust deposits. They give you that nice steel wheel finish. And then it was time to snap everything together. And I used one more piece of the lead tubing to connect the vehicle with the trailer, kind of like a real cabin trailer would have. And then it was time for some final details. The bumper snapped off, because of course it did, after I got everything together. So while it was apart, I put some rhinestones up front to simulate lenses, and then put some lenses on the Cybertruck before gluing it back on. And you can get these at your local hobby establishment or your favorite online retailer. Just look for rhinestone assortments, and you usually want them to be on the smaller side. They have ones that have like 2, 3, and 5 millimeter size rhinestones. Those are the ones to go for, because those will give you nice in-scale reflective elements that do a pretty good job of simulating lights, in my opinion. You also want to use white glue and not CA glue, because the CA glue will fog the lenses because they're plastic. Unfortunately, that means they don't hold as well as I would like, but since this is going to be designed to go on a shelf anyway, I'm not too worried about that. They are also a little tricky on the extremely small side. I just kind of added markers where I felt like it. That's one of the beauties of doing a fantasy vehicle, is you can put things wherever you want. I like this crack up because the taillights on the back of it actually look like the lenses on the back of a taillight that's already been busted out. So instead of painting them taillight red, I just painted them silver so they would look like what was left after you busted out the taillight lenses. And there it is, 3 complete pieces. Time to snap them all together and get to the final reveal. One last time, let's take a look at what we started with. The mainline Hot Wheels Tesla Cybertruck, which, despite being a Zamex, still needed to be stripped because there were tampos and stuff on it. And let's take a look at where we ended up. I love how this turned out. It was a really fun build, if it was in an incredibly trying time of my life. So it was a good distraction and a great project, and I'm honored to have participated in something with Ben and Andrew. So be sure to go subscribe to them, check them out, check out their builds. I'll be linking to them. And thank you to everyone who checked in on me and has sent notes. And yeah, it's a tough time, but I am keeping things together and putting one foot in front of the other and taking it one day at a time and all the other stuff that you need to tell yourself to keep moving forward. As always, I want to thank my patrons for keeping this thing running. They keep this show and Diecast Breakdown and everything else that we publish on here on the roll. And again, want to shout out David and Mark for being the best co-hosts that a guy could ever ask for. And I'm looking forward to working with them again soon. In the meantime, thank you to everybody who has watched, commented, liked, subscribed, all that good stuff. If you can keep doing that, it will help keep things going as I try to figure out how to find time to keep making more stuff. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad I'm here. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video. So until next time, stay fresh, cheese bags.